Thank you to the Wolfeboro Lions Club for underwriting nutritional wisdom. The Wolfeboro Lions Club is committed to helping the community with health concerns such as diabetes prevention and preservation of sight and hearing. The Wolfeboro Lions Club meets on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month in the 1812 room at the Wolfeboro Inn. Members of the community are encouraged to attend meetings or visit the website e-clubhouse.org/sites/Wolfeboro for more information.
Hi, this is Patty Walker, registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator, welcoming you to another edition of Nutritional Wisdom. In today and actually next month's episode, we are going to be demystifying food labels. According to an NPR study, most people use a food label to identify a healthy food once they're inside the store. The problem with that, that my clients especially tell me, is that they don't understand what the labels mean. They don't understand what the stamps mean. They don't understand what the health claims mean. And I actually heard one study that said if there's any claim on a label, the majority of people just assume it's low in calories. So even if it doesn't say low calories or light, it just assumes, oh, this must be healthy because it has a claim. So the manufacturers know that and will try to make the front of the label as attractive as possible, put as many claims as they can get away with on the front, but claims do not mean that it's a healthy food choice. So hopefully today we'll get to the bottom of what I mean by that. And another issue is the dates that are on the packages. It's estimated that about 25% of food is wasted in our country because we prematurely throw away food that actually is still good to consume. So they have the sell by dates and the best use by and the use by dates. So we will also review that. And I think that that's a great place to start, because what really surprised me when I investigated this is that there are no federal guidelines for putting dates on a product unless it's an infant formula. And if it's an infant formula and you have it and the date has expired, please throw it away. That is the only absolute time to throw away the product. So the typical dates you'd see are the best used by or best or used by dates. And all that basically guarantees is that if you consume the food at or before that date, it's going to have the best flavor and quality. It does not have anything to do with the safety of the product, however. So oftentimes you will find things in your cabinet that are a few days after the best used or used by dates, and you're saying, well, is this good or not? And in all honesty, it really depends on how well you stored the item. So if you brought it home, you put it refrigerated or froze it appropriately, or put it in the pantry at room temperature in a dark area, that's going to extend or that's going to prolong the shelf life of that item. So really what you want to do is be an investigator and look for signs of spoilage. So examples of that would be curdling or mildew, mold, wilted lettuce, slime on meat, discoloration. Those types of things are obvious signs of the product gone by. So I did bring a couple examples from my refrigerator. I am embarrassed to say I did have to throw away a couple items. The first one is kale, and it was pushed behind another container of lettuce, so it ended up being 10 days past its best use by date. And as you can see, the top leaves are yellow, and actually further down there was some water in the bottom of the container, and some of the leaves had really gone slimy, in all honesty. So I had to toss it. So that kale was no longer edible 10 days after its best use by date. The next container is a nice container of greens, and it's 7 days past the best use by date. There was nothing wrong with these greens. I kind of, lifted them up, I spread them out. The integrity of all the greens were good. They were still intact. They looked fresh. So I actually used it for a salad, and as you can see, I'm still here, so it was a good choice. I didn't throw away a half a container of the organic greens in that container. So that actually saved me $2.50, because anytime we throw away a food that is still edible, we're wasting money. The last item is the shredded cheese, and that one was almost a month past its expiration date by the time I had gone back to use it. And you will see that there's clearly some pictures of mold on the cheese, and if I lifted it up a little bit more than the top flake or top shred did have mold on it. So mold is a good example of something that you don't want to see, and I will say I did toss the cheese because it was shredded and it had a lot of surface area because it was shredded. There is a guideline for mold on cheese, however. So if it's a hard cheese like a cheddar or a provolone, a Colby, a Swiss, if there's mold, it tends to be on the outside edge of the cheese. You can actually cut off the mold plus an inch and the rest of the cheese is still edible. If it's a soft cheese, please don't do that. If it's a cream cheese, if it's a cottage cheese and you see any mold on it, don't eat it, just throw it away immediately. But just because a cheese has mold on it doesn't mean you have to throw it away, especially the hard cheeses. And just be sure that you give a good inch beyond where the mold is and it's still actually edible. So, and then the last date that you would typically see on a label would be the sell-by date. And that is actually informational for the grocer. That lets them know when to take it off the shelves. So that's when you tend to see, you know, the sales on the items, because they know that if it doesn't sell today or the next day, they're going to have to take it off and they're going to lose money. So I often take advantage of those sales. And if I don't intend to use the product right away, it's typically on meats that I would see that. I would put it in the freezer. And then when I defrost it, I would use it immediately. So I would be aware because there was a sale item on it. But, you know, so let's say you have some milk in your refrigerator or a loaf of bread, and you're checking the date and you said, oh my gosh, you know, this was a use by or a sell by date 2 days ago. I have to throw it away. Don't. Be an investigator. Make sure that, you know, it really is spoiled. I mean, with milk, if it's curdled, absolutely. If it smells sour, absolutely. But, you know, otherwise take a small sip, and if it tastes fine, you're going to be good to go with the milk. And, you know, the best way to extend the shelf life of any product is proper storage. So get it in the refrigerator as soon as possible, freeze it as soon as possible, or store it in a cool, dark area. With canned goods, if it's bulging, if it's leaking, if it's rusty, if it's dented, throw it away. Otherwise, canned goods that are acidic, so think tomato-based products, they generally have a shelf life of 12 to 18 months. And all other canned goods have a shelf life of up to 5 years. So just because it's after the use-by date, and I'm still talking a can of tuna or a can of chicken even, it doesn't matter if it's protein or if it's canned fruit in there, open it up, smell it, investigate it. If you're certain that it was stored properly, it still may be good. So that's going to be your judgment call, okay? But again, another great tip as far as storage is when you get new items, bring the ones that are on the shelf already towards the front so you use them up first, and that will help with the rotation. But hopefully those are some good tips as far as what the sell-by, use-by dates mean and how you might save some money by not throwing away food that's still edible. All right, so the next item that I want to talk about is the stamps. So we have stamps and seals and health claims on the packages. This is the area of misconfusion. It's shrouded in misconfusion. It's so easy to misinterpret. And so I like to start with the whole grain stamps. There's 3 of them there. The first on the left is 100% whole grain, the second is 50% whole grain, and the last one is whole grain. Okay, and then in the middle of those stamps, there's various grams. On the whole grain on the left, it says 23. In the middle, it says 32. And the one that just says whole grain says 20. It's like, what does any of that mean? It's like, I had to look it up. It is very, very confusing. What the Whole Grain Council did was standardize things. So if the item has 100% whole grain, it gets that 100% sticker or stamp. In addition, it can only get the stamp if it has 16 grams of whole grain in a serving. What does 16 grams mean? I have no idea. But apparently we're supposed to eat 48 grams of whole grains a day. So if you have 16 grams from 100% whole grain, you only need 3 servings of that a day to meet your needs. Confusing. The middle sticker is 50%, so it means that at least 50% of the grain in that product is whole grain, but not 100%, and it has to have a minimum of 8 grams. And in that particular instance, it says 32 grams. So, and then the last item, the last one is the whole grain. That just means that there are some whole grains in the product, but not the majority of it. And again, it must have a minimum of 8 grams. So it's super, super confusing. So I brought you a label because, again, the manufacturers want you, their goal is for you to go into the grocery store, look at the front of the package, and buy the food without turning to the nutrition facts or the ingredients. And they do a pretty darn good job. So here is a box of cereal, and it says oats, and it says whole wheat, and it also has honey. It's like, gee, that looks really healthy. And there's a whole grain, there's a whole grain stamp on it. But if you look at the stamp, it's not the 100%, it's not the 50%. So that should be your tip off that the majority of the grain is not whole grain. It doesn't have the minimum of 8 grams. It does say it has 12, okay? But that said, what else is in that product? So that's where you really do have to look at the nutrition facts and the ingredients. And if you look at the nutrition facts, you're going to see it's very low in fiber. It has 7 grams of added sugar. 4 grams of added sugar is equal to a teaspoon. So 7 grams is almost 2 added teaspoons. And if you look at the ingredients, the whole grain is the second and the fourth ingredient, and you definitely want it to be the first. But the front of the package looks like it's all natural, all good ingredients. Oh, and speaking of the word natural, there is no definition for natural except that it cannot have artificial color or flavorings in it. So natural doesn't mean that it's low fat, low sugar, low flour, because all those are natural foods. It just can't have artificial preservatives and colorings. Yet natural sounds really healthy. So manufacturers will often put natural right on the label so that you will buy it and not look further. The next item is the heart health stamps. So the first one on the left is by the American Heart Association, and it is it's actually a program they have. It's the Heart Check program, and they have very strict guidelines for about 9 or 10 different categories of food in order to be able to use this stamp. So as you would expect with the American Heart Association, it's going to have to do with salt or low fat or low cholesterol. And if you do have any heart conditions, it's a good stamp to look for. And I'll show you an example of what one is. But on the right, you have this beautiful little heart picture. It means nothing. There is no standardization for it. It is a health claim. And I'm actually going to read what's on that health claim in the heart if you can't read it. It states, while many factors affect heart disease, diets low in fat and cholesterol may reduce your risk of heart disease. Okay, that's evidence-based. That makes sense. What does that have to do with Raisin Bran cereal? Why is that claim on a box of Raisin Bran cereal? you would expect Raisin Bran cereal to be low in cholesterol. You would expect it to be low in saturated fat. And so the manufacturer, again, is hoping you're not going to look further. And it's like, there's a heart healthy item. But if you turn it over and you see the nutrition facts, you're also going to see that it is indeed low in fat, but it has it has a lot of sodium. It's not a heart healthy item, in my opinion, based on the sodium content, and 2 teaspoons of added sugar. It's not a heart healthy food, and there's no regulation as far as putting a cute little heart symbol on the package, unfortunately. Another example is the chicken broth. So most soups and broths are very high in sodium. So this one is 50% less sodium. So, it has 400 and something, I don't have the label in front of me, but you do. So it has over 400 milligrams of sodium in that 1 cup serving. That's not very heart healthy, especially when most people trying to reduce their sodium are keeping it around 1,500 or 2,000 milligrams. I mean, that's over 20-25% of your sodium needs in a cup of broth. So I would prefer not to see a heart symbol on that either. But again, the symbol means nothing. There's no regulation on putting a cute little heart on packages. So anyways, as I promised, the American Heart Association Heart Check, I actually looked in the grocery store long and hard and found very few products that had it. And I was pleased about that because, you have to, or another way of thinking about it, I wasn't, because it means not many products are going to meet that standard. But the one I found was Promise Margarine, and you will see the heart check there. And it is indeed lower in calories, lower in fat, lower in saturated fat than regular butter. So it met the American Heart Association guidelines as far as lower fat and lower saturated fat and lower cholesterol. And there is evidence that eating a diet lower in saturated fat and cholesterol can lower your risk of heart disease. Therefore, it met the standard. Okay. The other couple logos I want to discuss have more to do with how the food is produced, or how the animals are treated, or how the workers are treated. They're the logos that make a difference in the ethical considerations of food buying. So the first is the treatment of animals. I'll just like to start there. Not sure how many of you are aware that conventionally raised animals, we're talking mostly chickens and mostly cows, often can be confined in limited areas. I will say 75% of all antibiotics produced are given to animals. A lot of the cows will receive growth hormones. So realize that anything the animal consumes will become part of the product that it produces. So a lot of people are looking for more humane ways of ways to identify if the animals were raised and brought up humanely. So there are 2 good stamps to look for. One is certified humane, and the other is the animal welfare approved. So those stamps or logos or seals are right there for you to recognize. So let's give you some examples on how to use them. And I like to start with poultry because poultry is the most confusing, especially eggs. You go to the grocery store and you see free-range eggs, and you see pasteurized eggs, and you see cage-free eggs, and it's like, what does any of that mean? Aren't they all the same? And it's like, no, they're not. So I remember when I was going to school as a dietitian, I saw poultry buildings with cages just stacked and stacked and stacked on each other, and the chickens were inside the cages, 3 to 5 chickens in every cage, and that's how they were raised. The cages were on top of some cages were on top of the chickens below, and you can just imagine the conditions that those chickens had to live in. It was dark, they didn't see the sunlight, they didn't get outside, and that's conventional chicken. So cage-free is a better option. Unfortunately, cage-free just means they're not in cages. It doesn't mean that they still get exposure to outside. They still could be cage-free, and I won't even say running around, barely moving around in big warehouses. So cage-free just means that they're not in a cage. Usually it is a large building, and usually they don't have room to spread their wings. They might be able to go like this. So free range, what does that mean? Free range means they must have access to the outside. Doesn't mean that they use the access to the outside or what the access outside actually is, but they have access to the outside. So again, you have to be, if you're really, really concerned about the humane treatment of the animal products that you consume, you might want to look for that certified humane. So here is an example of a dozen eggs that are free range and have certified humane on it. That will at least give you the assurance that it has, what that certification actually means is that the chickens must have a minimum of 2 feet per chicken to spread its wings inside, in addition to having outside access. So certified humane is better than cage-free by itself. And the last one is the pasture raised, and this is the best. It allows the animals to move outside and engage in their natural behaviors. It allows them to scratch, it allows them to peck, it allows them to eat the insects. Unfortunately, there's no verification of these conditions. So pasture raised, again, if you're willing to put the extra investment into the humane raising of the animal and allowing them outside access, please look for the certified humane sticker on it. That will guarantee that those animals do have access outside, are in their natural environment, and have the best life that the chicken can have while producing eggs. That said, best options for eggs are your local neighbors, your farmers markets, the ones that are running around outside every day. So if you have to choose eggs, the best one is your local or your farmers market, or then the pasture raised certified humane. So this is again in regards to the welfare of the animal, if that's a priority in your life as far as how to choose a food. Okay. The next area I want to go over is the beef and what grass-fed versus, well, actually most of the animals, but it's with the grass-fed, it always has to do with the beef and the cows. So cows are grass is their natural food. So if you see grass-fed, it means that the cows had access to pastures and to eating grass. It does not mean that they were grass-fed their entire life. So what typically happens, and I know even locally happens, is the animal has access to grass the majority, and I'm saying the strong majority, so it's still a much better option than any conventionally raised animal. But usually are grain-fed the last 6 to 8 weeks, just to fatten them up and give us the texture and flavor of the product that we're accustomed to. So grass-fed is a good option, and it actually improves the quality of the protein. It's lower fat and it's a healthier fat. So if you can choose grass-fed, that would be a better option than conventional beef. Grain-fed means that they received a vegetarian diet. Well, all those animals are vegetarians, but if it's a grain-fed beef product, it could be corn, it could be soy, and those are grains that the animal is not naturally accustomed to eating. So a vegetarian diet doesn't mean that it's the healthiest diet for that particular breed. So just be aware that vegetarian diets are often put on labels and may sound healthy, but may not be exactly healthy, especially for cows. Antibiotic free, always good to look for that. As I'd mentioned, 75% of the antibiotics are given to animals. So if you find an antibiotic free That's a good thing, because the antibiotics, if they're raised with antibiotics, the antibiotics are part of the food that they produce. And there are theories about why we are becoming more and more antibiotic resistant, and is it in partial due to the foods we consume. So just something to think about. Hormone free, that's another good one to look at. By the way, pigs and chickens don't ever get hormones. So why on chicken labels and on pork labels does it say hormone free? They're just trying to make it sound healthier. So chickens and pigs don't get the hormones, but dairy cows do. And that's that RBGH, and that is given to help the dairy cow produce increased volume, but also hormones are given to accelerate the growth of beef cattle. Those hormones are definitely part of the products they produce, and unfortunately are associated with cancers. So hormone-free would be a good idea, and organic is always hormone-free in that regard. So I have 3 examples of some beef. The first is the grass-fed beef, the sirloin, and it's going to be much healthier than the organic, but again, I'm sorry. Okay, we really have to redo that one. Okay, I have 3 examples of some beef products. The first is the grass-fed, those sirloin pieces there. What that means, that it was grass-fed. I'm not convinced that it was not grain finished. So you always want to look for grass-fed and grass-finished if you're trying to ideally figure that one out. But it's going to be much better than the conventionally raised. Then you have the organic grass-fed hamburger, and that is the best. Again, that cow has been outside the whole time. It did not get grain. And then the last one is Laura's ground beef. And boy, I was snookered with that one, because I said, boy, that looks healthy. And again, it was on the sell by date, 25% off. I'm like, okay, I'm going to buy this because it's less expensive. It's good quality, less expensive. And it does definitely say no antibiotics or hormones, but it says fed a vegetarian diet, and there's no way for me to know if it was corn, soy, or grass. So, and I also don't know if it was confined its whole life. So that one was not the best choice for me to make. Couple seals that you might, or stamps you might see on farming practices. USDA organic is the gold standard. It is the best seal that you could find on a product. It guarantees no pesticides, no herbicides, no genetically modified ingredients. It's also super expensive, and so the majority of farms don't go through the process of being organic certified. So what can you do about that? One thing is to go to the Environmental Workers Group, evg.org, and they every year update their list of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, which are the produces, your fruits and vegetables that have either the most or the least amount of toxins, pesticides, and herbicides. So if it's on the Dirty Dozen, you may want to consider buying organic. But what else you can do is look for a seal called the Certified Naturally Grown. That's a peer-reviewed seal, but what it means is that the farms haven't paid for certification as being organic, but practice organic habits. So those are the ones that you'd find at your farmers markets and your CSAs, and that would be an equally good seal to consider. And the last is the non-GMO project, and that guarantees that it doesn't have any genetically modified organisms, which typically is glyphosate, which is Roundup. And what that means is that the glyphosate is part of the seed, so you would be ingesting the insecticide, actually. So you want to, if you care about genetically modified, and unfortunately there's no federal regulations telling the manufacturers to notify you if there's any genetically modified organisms in your food. And what's commonly genetically modified is your sugar, your canola, your wheat, your corn, and your soy, and also cotton oil, cottonseed. So those are common ingredients. So if you ever see the non-GMO project seal, that's a really, really good one. Okay, so, and it's voluntary, so I give kudos to the manufacturers for going through the process of getting that seal there. All right, and then the last couple have to do with the fair and ethical treatment of the workers, which means that they get fair wages and have acceptable working conditions. So that would be Fair for Life and Fair Trade. So you'll see those typically on coffee, chocolate, imported items such as that. All right, that will be what I will cover today as far as the labels. But before we stop, I do have a wonderful recipe, super, super easy. July, I think, of raspberry season in New Hampshire. So this is a frozen raspberry lemon yogurt. 4 ingredients, actually 5, but you need 4. You need the Greek yogurt, the plain Greek yogurt. You need your raspberries. Please buy them locally or pick them and freeze them. You have to freeze them in order to use them in the recipe because the frozen raspberries make the difference. You can't put room temperature raspberries in this recipe or it won't freeze. Then you have your lemon juice, your lemon zest, and a little bit of honey. Put it all in a blender. You can have it right from the blender, or if you like it, and it will be a little softer there, and if you like it a little bit firmer, like a sherbet type or an ice cream type texture, put it in an airtight container in your freezer for an hour or 2 and enjoy. Thank you so much.